It is my pleasure and a real privilege to be interviewing someone here today. How many people are on social media? You all on social media? Online has changed our world. And we got a very special lady here today. She was one of the first employees with Twitter. And she was there for 5.5 years, and she led social innovation on her team in Twitter. And I want you to put your hands together and welcome Claire Ortiz to the stage. Can we do that? Come on, Claire. How you doing?
Thank you, I'm great.
So good, so good. Claire, a privilege to have you.
Thanks. I have my phone, and I'm doing that thing that you have to do in 2017 where you can't sit down anymore because your phone's in your back pocket.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay, I got it figured out.
Good. Claire, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised and all of that.
Sure. So I was born and raised not far away, Berkeley, California, the Athens of the West. And I had a great, fun childhood as a Protestant in Berkeley, California, which I think is like a diamond in the rough or something, right? And then went off to school at Stanford, which caused some chaos in my house.
Wow.
You are not from the area, but there is a certain rivalry between those two institutions. Went to school, had a great 4 years at school, but in my fourth year made the smart but terrible decision to do a master's degree at the same time as I was finishing up my undergrad, right? So, great thing to do on paper, terrible thing to do in practice. I was unbelievably burnt out. And by the time I got to end of those 4 years, I said, I need to rest. And I read a book about a couple that had retired to a small town in Mexico, and I thought, that's it. So I went to the small town in Mexico where this couple had retired because I was 22 and single, of course. And had an amazing year doing very, very little. I had this crappy online editing job, and it paid the bills.
Good.
And I just had this incredible year. And at the end of that year, I said, you know what? I'm going to do what I've always dreamed of, and I'm going to go travel the world.
Good.
And so that was sort of the beginning of the story. You want me to keep going?
Go, just keep going.
Already confused, yeah.
No, it's good.
It's already
all
over the place. So I spent a couple years basically traveling around the world. And I got my best friend to come for a certain 9-month period. And we went to some amazing countries, saw awesome stuff. And finally, at the end of that trip, we said we want to go to Kenya, right? I'd long wanted to go back to Africa. I'd been there once before. We're going to go to Kenya, and we're going to climb a mountain. Mount Kenya, one of the biggest mountains in Africa. At the time, no longer, I was athletic. I had run some marathons, and I'd climbed to the base camp of Mount Everest. So we said, yeah, we're going to do this big mountain in Africa. So we get to Kenya, and a friend of a friend had said, if you're going to go to Kenya and you're going to climb the mountain, you should stay at this guest house that's near the base of the mountain. I know the people that own the guest house. You should go there. We said, sure. The guest house was free or nearly free, and that time we did anything that was free or nearly free. So we said, yeah, sure. And it turns out the guest house was actually owned by an orphanage. So when we show up, the orphanage elders invite us to a lunch at the orphanage. We go into the lunch that day, eating their awesome food. And in the middle of that lunch, I said, I'm going to go wash my hands. I just felt compelled to sort of step out for a minute. I go to this little bathroom they have in the back, and I clearly remember there's this kind of scratchy mirror on the wall, and I look in that mirror, and I've never had an experience like this before and never had one since, where I really just felt like God was actually speaking to me, and saying, open your eyes because I am about to do something here.
Wow.
And so I thought, okay, that's weird. I just saw God in the dirty mirror. I don't know what's going on, right? I go back to the lunch, and I tell Laura, my best friend, I say, I'm not going to climb the mountain. I think I'm going to stay here because I think something weird's happening. I don't know. I got to figure it out, She said, okay, Claire, whatever. I guess she was used to me, doing weird stuff. So I stayed, I guess she was gone for 4 or 5 days, and so I pulled out the Bible that I found at the guest house of the orphanage, and I looked, and it said, it was like 2,500 pages, and I'm like, okay, I'm a fast reader, right? So I can scan this while I fast, and then by the time I finish scanning it, I will know if I'm supposed to stay at the orphanage, okay? So I fainted by the time I got to Leviticus, which is, missionary best practice. Eat when you're on your mission trips, right? So you don't make your host take you to the health clinics. So I decided I'm going to stay at this orphanage, and I do. And I, stay there for the rest of the year, start a small nonprofit that still exists to that day.
Wow.
And all the while, the reason I'm able to do any of this and raise funds for the orphanage and do anything is because I'm on this tiny little weird platform called Twitter. And so I'm sharing this story with the world. And ultimately, me becoming a user led to me becoming an employee.
Incredible.
So that's kind of a weird story.
So when you were one of the earliest employees in Twitter, what was it like in those early days? And when was the moment you just thought, this is going global, this is going off the charts?
Well, first of all, so when I showed up, there were about 50 folks, and there were 2 bathrooms, okay? And I thought, that's okay. Maybe that's legal. I'm not sure what the rules are in California.
Right.
50 bathrooms, or 50 people, 2 bathrooms.
Sounds like a lot of our churches. That's what it sounds like.
But I said, this is actually a really good deal because there are 50 people, but there's probably only like 8 women, right? So we've got it good, right? There's 1 hair dryer. We don't have to share that much, right? But it turns out that all the men used women's bathroom all the time, so it actually wasn't that helpful. Another story I remember from the early days was one day I was typing as you do, right? That's sort of what work is these days.
Yes.
It's just like typing, right? And someone knocked on the front door of Twitter, and they knock, and my friend, who was, I don't know, doing like business development, who knows what her job was, right? Gets up to go answer the door, and there's a user there who needs help uploading her profile picture, right? And so my friend's like, okay, I'll help you do that, right?
Yeah.
So the user pulls out the profile picture, and it's like a very revealing bikini shot. So that was what my friend was doing that day for her business development career.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
If you all need some help afterwards, just line up there and Claire will help you.
That was Twitter.
Help you with your profile. So tell me about probably the most exciting moment that you had at Twitter, that you got to meet someone very special and help him get a handle and all of that stuff.
I did. So in 2012, there was some data engineers at Twitter that were doing some research on what tweets were really working and what tweets really weren't. And they started to see something that they thought at the time was kind of an anomaly, right? And they were seeing basically small pastors tweeting out Bible verses, and then these Bible verses were getting crazy engagement. And they were like, okay, there must be something wrong here. But basically, they dove down into a rabbit hole, and we all come out the other side realizing that religious tweets on Twitter are way more engaged than basically anything else. They punch way above their weight. So we said, okay, we've got to start making this a priority.
Yeah.
So basically, I spent the whole year of 2012 working with the Vatican to get Pope Benedict on Twitter. And it was an amazing experience. Yeah, no, as you do, right? And it was an incredible experience.
I think we got a picture of him here. His very first tweet ever. Do we have a picture there?
Let's see. If you have the picture,
the guy
you
in the
can
white
see.
guy. It's the guy in the big with an iPad. Okay, we don't have that picture.
So in the, and there were 2 sort of complaints my family had. First, in the pictures that appear with me standing next to the Pope, my mom says, "Why on earth did you wear a ponytail?" She didn't like that. And then the other complaint was, of course, I live in Argentina, and my whole family on my husband's side is all Argentine. And, I spent this whole year getting Pope Benedict on Twitter, and 2 months later, the Argentine Pope comes in, and they said, man, you missed it by 2 months, right?
Wow. So how did you choose his Twitter handle? I mean, I would think, at The Godfather would have been a great one. Do you know what I'm saying? Something...
I actually, I remember there was like a Google Doc of like 100 options, and I clearly remember one of them being Pope tweets, which is,
not great.
I don't
What
think
did you settle on in the end?
Pontifex.
Pontifex.
And it's Pontifex in a bunch of different languages.
That's so good. So tell me about this. We all have social media in our lives. Just, how much of our lives should we reveal on Twitter, Facebook, because you wake up in the morning and someone's going already, had a coffee, exciting, like. What should we be sharing and what should we not be sharing online?
Well, there's something you may or may not know about me. I don't know if it's So I am actually the first, and I'm sure the only person in the history of the world to have live tweeted their child's birth.
Oh, wow.
So in 2014, when I have 3 kids, when she was born, She was born 3 weeks early. I woke up in the middle of the night, started having contractions, didn't know if it was a contraction, went on Google, am I having a contraction? And then the next thing in my brain that I thought to do was then put that phrase into Twitter, right? Am I having a contraction? And then it just spiraled out of control.
Wow.
And so it just became this viral blah, blah thing. And yeah.
So you're in the hospital, gas and air going.
Yeah, epidural, please.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
For me, that experience was fun. It was entertaining. It was a way for me to keep my mind off something that was otherwise, the most physically painful experience of my life. Things like that. But I do think there is a line. I also did get a lot of criticism for that.
Okay.
And so it was interesting because this year I had almost 6 months ago I had twin boys. And thank you. And they're a handful. And they are, thank you, Jesus, they are so great now. But they were born 9.5 weeks early, right? So really, really early. I had a very tough pregnancy. And when we went into the hospital that morning, and I'd been having problems the whole time, but I thought, this might be the day that we're gonna have to pull them out at 30 weeks, which is really early for kids.
Yeah.
And so they say, I go in, the doctor says, yep, it's now, and she puts me in the intake room to fill out forms for half an hour,
Yeah.
as you do apparently in an urgent C-section
Yes.
situation. I don't know. And, I was there and I was, calling my parents and calling my friends. And I remember my husband and I had this moment where I was like, I see, there is a line.
Yes.
Even I have a line,
Okay.
and I am not going to
How much
post
you will
this
tweet.
right now. Isn't that interesting though?
Yeah, is everyone, yes, tweet your birth.
No, but we all,
So it's from the mundane to, yes, the exciting. What about the revolutionary type stuff? Like so many of us watched the Arab Spring.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were talking about the power of Twitter at that time, helping people connect. And can, Twitter, social media cause revolutions?
Sure. So I think there are a couple important things to think about here. So the first thing is, when we go back to 2009, the summer of 2009, there were these protests in Iran that summer, and the government wanted to shut down Twitter because they figured out that a lot of the youth were actually mobilizing via Twitter. And that was how they were getting together and, deciding what day they're going to protest. And so the State Department of the US actually contacted Twitter to please request that they keep the service live in the country,
Wow.
right? And this, for me, was kind of the first moment where I knew this is something, right? This isn't just about what you're tweeting, what you're telling people you're having for breakfast. This is going to be something. Now, over the years, we've seen, again and again, the way Twitter has been used in movements and even in revolutions. But, that doesn't mean that revolutions happen because of, little apps on our phones,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's a famous article Malcolm Gladwell wrote in which he basically says, the revolution will not be tweeted. And, a lot of people kind of said, well, but look, Malcolm, it is. But, honestly, at the end of the day, revolutions are not about, the Twitter. They're about the people and the hearts of the people and people making change. And something like Twitter, the only thing it can maybe do is it can maybe catalyze things to happen a little bit faster than they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, a revolution starts in the heart of a person,
Brilliant.
not in that little bird.
So so many of us go by an age-old adage, which is leadership is influence. And just talk about online influence because, hey, even the leader of our great nation at this moment in time, he loves Twitter. His wife doesn't like him being on Twitter, but he loves Twitter and he's tweeting and he's having influence. What about every single leader in this room? How can they leverage tweets, online, social media for a force for good? How can they do that?
So I think there are kind of two things here. First of all, influence is really in kind of we think it's in the eye of the beholder, but I actually think influence is really inside ourselves. So, I mean, we might see someone like our fair president tweeting and thinking that he's having influence that maybe he isn't at the end of the day sometimes. So I think influence is really about who we are inside. But in terms of how we can use a platform like social media to make a difference, at the end of the day, what something like Twitter does is it just sheds a spotlight on what you're already doing, right? So doing the good you want to do in the world anyway is your fastest kind of path to success and creating change around you. And all Twitter is going to do is going to help kind of other people see that good and maybe pick up on it to roll that ball forward.
So basically, it's just amplifying the good that you're already doing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Hey, it's been so good. Just tell us then briefly as we finish, what are you doing at the moment? What's happening in your life?
I write on the internet. No, and I like that phrase. I write on the internet. I stole it from someone, but I think it's funny. I write books. I just came out with a new book with Ken Blanchard. He wrote The 1 Minute Manager about 20 years ago, and we came out with this book, 1 Minute Mentoring. I think mentoring is one of the smartest things you can do in business and in life to kind of find a balanced sense of success and fulfillment and peace ultimately. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
And people obviously go online, get your book, and do all of that.
Yeah, but are we done here? Because there's something very important we have to do before I get off stage.
Yes.
Okay, can we do a selfie?
A selfie? And you're going to tweet it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I brought my phone.
Yeah. Oh,
I wasn't going to check emails.
We want the Pope to see this. I want this to go straight to the Vatican, okay? Yes, everybody? I want him to like this. That would be so good. Come on, everyone. Now start waving. Wow. Hey, come on, put your hands together. Let's thank Claire.